tech, but we'll make it work here.
Okay.
So to start, if you could tell me, could you actually brief me on your military history, sir?
Navy. I went into the Navy on the day that Robert Kennedy was shot, and did 4 years. Trained as a combat photographer and managed to stay out of combat. Traveled the world, Cuba, South America, Mediterranean, North Atlantic. Home based out of Norfolk and Pensacola for a while. Had some very good duty.
That's very cool.
I had exceptional duty.
Very interesting perspective on history there from your behind the lens, right?
Well, and it's funny that, I mean, in boot camp, we go to church every Sunday, and in church that first Sunday, the first news item was not Robert Kennedy. It was that a Navy sub had been lost at sea, and I think it was the Scorpion. So that's what we heard about first, and there was a huge ramp up. Of course, it was June of '68, and boot camp had been shortened from 15 to 9 to 7 weeks. They kept pushing people out to the fleet, and you know, it was just get in, get out. Really strange time in history.
Bill, of course, was Army.
Yeah.
You won't hold that against him, though, do you?
Yeah, you know, I need to get some more Navy people on the board here, but okay. We'll live with the Army guys. Although I noticed that I joked with them all when they wanted to get Bin Laden, they called the Navy, so you get the SEALs.
If you can give us a brief history of your history with Bill.
I actually missed meeting him first. I was treasurer of the board back in the mid-90s, and I left my job in Rochester, took another job, and left as treasurer of the board here, and Bill came on as treasurer of the board at that point. But you know, when I came back into town, rejoined the board, met Bill at that point, and the rest, I say, is history. He's a remarkable guy. He's given his all to this place.
So it's been upwards of 20 years?
Well, close on 20, yeah. Yeah, I mean 95, 96 was, so 15, 16 years.
How have you seen VOC change over that time?
Well, the growth has been quantitative over time. I mean, I think back then we were about a $250,000, $300,000 agency, and clearly we've grown significantly from there. We used to meet, the board meetings used to meet in the house up where the big table is, up by your office, and it was hot. I mean, it was, during the summer it was almost unbearable hot. It was like the attic. And, you know, people cared then and cared now. Just the demand keeps growing.
You were both on the board at the beginning?
No, I didn't join the board until much later. Tom Cray and I went to college together, and Tom approached me at one point about joining the board, and came on as a board member, and then the treasurer's position came open on the board, and they asked me if I would take that on, and we had some changeover in leadership. Bob Hickey left the center as president, and we were kind of managing the center short term from the board.
What was Bill's capacity at that time?
Well, he came on after I left, so he came on as treasurer, I think. He was at RG&E at the time, and I think he came on board as treasurer for the board and stayed on it for a long time.
So he literally filled your shoes.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's the transition that I remember.
If you could, again, I'm gonna re-ask kind of what I asked before, but the growth of the agency over these years that you've seen.
Well, when I was on the board originally, we had the house, and it was essentially people would come in and talk. The housing didn't exist, and we went through the first development of housing. We were looking at a facility over on Winton Road, used to be a convent, and we got into a protracted discussion with the town of Irondequoit. At one point during that, the Department of Justice stepped in and basically came to Irondequoit and said, you cannot prevent this type of housing from occurring. You must get out of the way. And Irondequoit finally relented, and then we realized that there was a better facility up the street, and we moved from Irondequoit instead of for our target and built out up on the corner of South there. So that was the first housing project that we had. And when I left the board, that was just making the transition over from the Irondequoit site to here for development. So from then, that's where the housing side took off. We started out with what had been a restaurant building, Dick Mall's Steakhouse, and put in the housing for emergency housing. And then gradually expanded up there. It was still just the house. Then, we were talking about the building that the flag store is in at that point, but nothing had happened when I was here on the board the first time. And at that time, the building had a barber shop downstairs and some very unsavory characters upstairs. And there was a lot of other activities occurring that the landlord, I think, was glad to get rid of and work something out with us. And then we took over that building and expanded into the building that Stars and Stripes is in. And then gradually we kept expanding the opportunities, and we developed the tech center and began to offer more programs, more groups. Then gradually we got around to doing the capital campaign to build what is now the Golisano building and take over the house next door as well. So it's been just growth, and it's been kind of organic. As the programs identified more and more demand, we found ways to keep expanding our opportunities. And clearly, we all know that veteran services that are offered elsewhere are simply not able to serve everybody that needs it. The backlogs are great, and I think there's also a feeling that a private agency, there's a little more trust. People want to come here, and we can get started and serve them and point them in the right direction. And that word of mouth spreads quietly, although I still think we're the best kept secret in town.
I would agree with that. Certainly something that sets this agency apart is veterans, helping veterans. Bill, as a veteran, what is your perspective on his contributions to the agency?
Well, I don't think there's anybody that you could say has done more to serve this agency. Bill served on the board and then stepped into management role here when it was needed. As I was telling you earlier, I think he's retired more times than anybody I've ever seen. He stepped in, worked with the center, joined the board, came back to the center as an employee, went back on the board, came back as an employee. Each time this center has had a need, Bill has stepped up and filled that need in a variety of ways, both from outside as a board member and generating support financially from businesses he's worked in or other businesses, and just his personal contribution. And to be honest, I will tell you very clearly as chairman, there's been some events and things that could not have been done without Bill. I mean, I have valued his advice, his service, his guidance. We've worked closely on some projects that without him wouldn't have happened. He's been a tremendous help.
Any words of congratulations to him for receiving the Harris Award?
Well, when I called him and asked him if he would consider accepting, he was, as typical Bill, was reluctant. And there's no one that deserves it more. He is the quintessential veteran supporter, has stepped up every time this agency or veterans in general have needed help. And I think he deserves every bit of recognition that he's getting.
Excellent. Well, we certainly hope to do right by him with this little presentation. So we're all set here, and we appreciate your time.